Welcome in, everybody, to my second ever roster review on the channel. Previously, we covered the Toronto Argonauts. If you missed that, it'll be down in the comment section. I'll link that. And without further ado, let's get into talking about the Ottawa Redblacks. And it wasn't my intention to do the two teams that finished at the bottom of the 2019 standings first, but that's just how the name got drawn out of the hat. And today we're going to be talking about the Ottawa Redblacks, the team that I would say has been hurt the most by these recent wave of retirements going through the CFL. We're going to talk about all the implications of that in this video. So first, I'll go over my positional rankings, where they rank 1 to 9 in the league at each position. Then I'll get into the projected starters / ratio possibilities. Where are they going to start their 7 Canadians? Maybe even more Canadians on this roster. And then I'm going to go into my team award predictions for the most outstanding player, most outstanding Canadian. You get the drift there. And then I'll close out with my final thoughts, some general predictions, that kind of thing. And without further ado, let's go into the first positional reveal, and it's going to be the quarterback position. And Ottawa's going to rank 8th here. So this is obviously the second quarterback room we've looked at, and the first one, Toronto, they ranked 9th. In this case, they're going to rank 8th. And the reason why they rank above Toronto, for example, is because I just trust Matt Nichols, who's been a starter in the CFL for a long time, to steady the ship for this offense, honestly. And at the same time, I don't think that Matt Nichols is necessarily a ceiling-raising player. As we'll look at later on, we'll see this is not that talented of an offense. So he's really going to have to up his game if they're going to make a push here this season. And Matt Nichols, he's going to make those quick decisions. He's going to get the ball out of his hands quickly, make the right decision, like I said. But he's not going to be the guy that pushes the ball down the field on a consistent basis. He's not going to be the guy that can, improvise in the pocket and, break these tackles and extend plays. So it's really where you draw the line with Matt Nichols. But I really do like him as a quarterback. I think you're fine with him as a quarterback. I think, Winnipeg arguably could have won the Grey Cup if he had stayed healthy with him under center in 2019. It's just unfortunate that he got injured and had to lose his starting job there. And he comes over from Toronto after that weird shift, trade basically, of Arbuckle and him is changing places this offseason due to contractual situation. As a result, he's going to be the starter here in Ottawa and reunites with Paul LaPolice, the head coach, who was his offense coordinator in Winnipeg. Now, his backup is likely to be Dominique Davis, who opened the 2019 season as the Redblacks starter. And I like Dominique Davis to an extent because I think I could see the talent there. He had an excellent one game during the 2019 season against Saskatchewan where he really looked like one of the best quarterbacks in the CFL that day. But other than that, he really struggled during that short stint as a starter during the 2019 season. He had one brutal game that he threw 4 interceptions against Calgary. He'll make those bad decisions. He doesn't get through his reads quickly enough, in my opinion, but he has that physical talent. He will do a lot of the things that Matt Nichols won't. He will, break those tackles in the pocket and extend plays and give this offense a fighting chance on plays that, might have just been a wash, right? So I think Dominic Davis is an interesting player to still keep around here as a backup option. Maybe he gets a start here or there this season. Really interested to see what his role with this team is going forward. And then you got a trio of American-signed rookies here with Tarin Christian coming from South Dakota. He's a pretty athletically capable guy with 4.5 40-yard dash time and has some athleticism to provide some upside to this unit. And then you got Caleb Evans, who comes over from Louisiana Monroe, a dual threat quarterback that had a standout college career. And then Chase Litton, not really an athletic type, but he's 6'6", has a big arm, can really excel at the downfield passing from what I've read. And it's going to be interesting to see if any of these guys get a crack at playing time this season or in the next couple of seasons with Matt Nichols still here, right? At running back, they're going to rank 9th, unfortunately, and the reason for this is really they just don't have a guy that's shown the ability to carry the ball consistently at the CFL level. Timothy Flanders who's a veteran guy that has been used a little bit as a slot guy. He's been used a little bit in the backfield, but it hasn't really been a full-time position for him. He's likely going to be the lead guy for the starting role here in 2021, but going to be interesting to see how Paul LaPolice, the head coach, works with this guy who has worked with before and implements him into this offense as a full-time running back. And going to be interesting to see how that works out going forward. And then competing for this job would be Akeem Hunt, who is the most noteworthy of all these guys left on this list. He is most notable for his time with the Kansas City Chiefs, where he mostly played a return role, but also saw some carries out of the backfield. Has some explosiveness that you really like to see, and it's going to be interesting to see if he can crack into the lineup here and take over this role into training camp. It's more than possible with how wide open it is. Brandon Galanders is a Canadian running back who's a great special teams player, but unfortunately, in the times that he did get to start during the 2019 season, it's obvious that he lacks that explosive element that you really need to be a Canadian Football League running back. So I just don't see him factoring too much in on the offensive side. He's going to be around because he's a guy that every team loves to have on the special teams and been a very key part of this unit for a long time. And then Detrez Newsome, he has apparently average speed for the running back position, but is a well-rounded back otherwise, according to scouting reports that I've read. Kenny Young, don't know much about him, but we'll see how he factors into this offense going forward. Now, wide receiver is another position they're honestly going to rank 9th, and this is where the confusion really happens for Ottawa. It starts to really fall apart because the retirement of Brad Sinopoli is just gigantic for this unit. He was their best player, I would say, on this roster going into this season, but now with him retired, it puts a lot of things up in the air and what they're going to do with this receiving core, who's going to be the go-to guy. And we'll start with RJ Harris, who I think is by far the most proven of all the guys on this list right here. I think he has a lot of talent, but he really struggled with consistency and getting open on a consistent basis. He's not the guy that has shown it on a consistent basis to this point in his CFL career. A lot of the yards he put up in 2019 were in those garbage time, prevent defense kind of situations, and he's going to have to step up and take that number one role, I think, in this Ottawa offense as the most proven guy of this group. And then you got Rafael Rouge Lopez, who started a few games at the beginning of the season in 2019, but he showed some flashes, and I think he's going to be given the first crack really at starting at one of those wide receiver positions for this Ottawa Redblacks offense. Devontae Dedmon, who's known for his return abilities, an explosive return man, I think he's going to factor in somewhat on offense this season. They're going to find a way to use him. Much like, think about a guy like Brandon Banks and how he came to the CFL. He's more of a return specialist guy, and then they gradually transition him into the offense. I think a similar thing could happen for Devontae Dedmon here, especially with the lack of options really that they have, at least in terms of proven options here at the CFL level. And then you got guys like Irvin Phillips from the University of Syracuse, Marvel Ross from Notre Dame of Ohio, Jordan Smallwood from Oklahoma, who started for the LA Wildcats in the XFL in 2020. Cortrell Simpson, they've had him for the last couple of off seasons because he hasn't gotten to make his debut because of the canceled 2020 season, and they re-signed him, so that really shows you that they doubled down on this guy. Jermaine Smith is another guy that's seen some playing time with this team in the past in 2019, but it was on a limited basis. He had like 8 receptions, but going to be interesting to see if he gets one of the first cracks at getting playing time during training camp. And then you got a guy like Joe Walker, who was a former quarterback at Delaware, switched to wide receiver in the middle of his career, and is a bigger body receiver. Another guy that they brought in and was signed for the 2020 season and then re-signed to come into this season as well. And then for the Canadian side of the receiving core, you got Anthony Coombs, who comes over from Hamilton. He's easily the most proven guy out of this group of receivers in terms of actually seeing the field in the CFL offense. He can run a little running back too, so don't be surprised if he gets some handoffs here or there. He's probably going to be a starter in this Redblacks offense with Brad Sinopoli retiring. Daniel Peterman, who comes over from Winnipeg, saw some limited action there. More of that short, shifty kind of receiver. Not a lot of size there to win those contested catches, but really good route runner in the short to intermediate game. I think he's going to see some playing time in this offense as a guy that Paul LaPolice is familiar with from his time with Winnipeg. Marco Dubois has been with this team for a while. He's kind of like a fullback slot hybrid. He's going to catch a few balls here and there, but I don't see really an expanded role for him. Kalukas is a guy that, he saw some opportunities for Calgary in 2019, but he was inconsistent with his hands, in my opinion, and he has good size for the wide receiver position. It's going to be interesting to see if he can, rebirth his career here in Ottawa. Wesley Lewis, I don't know too much about him. Same with Malcolm Williams and Amba Atatawo. Sorry about the pronunciation there, guys. I don't know too much about those guys. They just haven't really shown a lot in their CFL careers to this point, but we shall see going into the future. And then the final two guys are the global players that the Redblacks are bringing to camp in the receiving corps. But anyway, that is the receiving room for the Ottawa Redblacks, and it's just super unproven, and that's why it ranks 9th. But I'm really excited to see how it shakes out and who gets all these starting spots in the 2021 coming out of training camp. On the offensive line, and this is another position that this is where they've really been hit with a lot of retirements, even more so, I think, than the wide receiver position with Brad Sinopoli. So they lose Alex Mateus, and that's the guy that's in the picture here. He was originally going to be the guy that I was going to talk about the most in this section because he was the number 1 overall pick in the 2014 CFL draft, and he, has been such a consistent player for them at the center position, but he decided to retire after 5 seasons in the CFL. A huge loss for them. And then another guy they lose is Alex Fontana, who was probably going to be the guy to replace him at center, who was their first round pick in 2019. So 2 really huge losses off the bat. There were rumors that Nolan McMillan was also going to retire this offseason, but luckily he has decided to play as of the recording of this video. But with that said, let's talk about the guys that are actually going to be playing here for the Ottawa Redblacks this season on the offensive line. Matt Cordy, really liked his film in 2019. He really grew as the season went along at that left tackle spot, the rare Canadian tackle that we see in the CFL right now. Really excited to see his development on this offensive line. He is for sure going to be one of their starters. Nolan McMillan, their best offensive lineman the last time we saw this team play. So glad that he's coming back, apparently. And then Natai Rogers, a guy that saw some playing time in 2018. I think he was out of the CFL in 2019, but he is likely going to be one of their starters just because he has that playing time experience in the CFL. Jacob Zott is a guy that they drafted a few years ago, and looking into his history, he's played a little bit of center in the past, so I think he might get that first crack at that center role now that Fontana and Mateus are all gone. Tyler Catalina, more of a tackle type, going to be competing for that tackle job. Probably that right tackle job is going to be the big question mark for this offensive line. Andrew Piggott is a guy that I'll probably project to start, but he hasn't really seen a lot of playing time. It's this is his opportunity to actually get on the field in the CFL. He's been in the development for this team, a former draft pick in 2018. It's really his time to shine with this unit, if ever. Say I put his name up there because he was such an interesting player going into the 2020 CFL draft, where a lot of people thought he might actually go with the number 1 pick, and then he mysteriously dropped in draft day all the way to the 8th round. Now, it's quite possible this guy does nothing at the CFL level, but because he was so highly regarded by some people in the scouting process, I'm really curious to see if he ends up making a fool of all these CFL GMs during his CFL career. Josh Dunlop, Jamar McCluster, American players that are going to be competing for roster spots here in 2021. Same with Brandon Hittner. And there are many, many more other offensive linemen that are in the training camp roster for the Redblacks. So, going to be a very wide open competition for a lot of these spots. Now, let's change the conversation a bit to a little bit more positive. Let's go to the defensive side. And now they're going to rank 7th here, but I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I just like a lot of the defensive lines right now in the CFL. Avery Ellis was their best pass rusher in 2019, provided some consistent pressure off the edge. He's your quality starting defensive end here. Frank Beltre's been in the CFL for a while, but hasn't really established himself as that consistent every down pass rusher. It's going to be interesting to see if he's going to take the reins of this starting defensive end job right now. A lot of people have him penciled as that other defensive end starter. Cleon Lang, what a huge addition this was to the Redblacks defense when they signed him during the 2020 offseason. He's one of the best Canadian players in the league. He's the guy pictured right here. He has that explosiveness, but also that quick, twitchy, lateral agility that can really handcuff these CFL offensive linemen, especially on the interior. And he's just been a very consistent player, pass rusher, run defender throughout his CFL career, and really excited to see how he fits into this defense. Janelle Jenkins likely figures in at that other defensive tackle spot, competing for that at least, with Devon Coleman is another guy with CFL experience. Those two guys likely battle it out for that other defensive tackle spot. And Stephon Charles is a defensive tackle that played in the NFL for a few years. I remember him when he was with the Buffalo Bills. He finally comes to the CFL. He's finally going to make his long-awaited CFL debut, because I believe he signed with the Edmonton football team during the 2019 season, and then he never played a game for the team. So going to be interesting to see how he factors in the rotation. I think he's likely the backup to Cleon Lang, solidifying that Canadian ratio spot right there on the defensive line. Rashawn Davis was a late pick in the 2020 CFL draft. Going to try to make the roster here, probably a special teams guy. Nigel Romick, a guy that was on the 2019 roster, has been on the team for a while. Likely going to compete on special teams, and he's probably going to make the roster in that regard. At linebacker, this is where we change the conversation a bit. They're going to rank 3rd, and the main reason for this is Don Yanumba, who I believe to be the best strong side linebacker in the CFL. He just has the best combination of skill sets. He can rush the passer. He's very effective as a blitzer. He's very effective as a coverage man. You can drop him back as like a safety if you need to. He has the physicality to play near the line of scrimmage and can hold up in that run defense category. Really excited to see what he adds this defense after coming over from Edmonton. Avery Williams was probably this defense's best player in 2019. Big tackling machine, sideline to sideline kind of guy. Maybe not the best coverage linebacker, but you don't really ask your middle linebacker really to be that all that much. Gerard Fernandez showed some really good coverage instincts at that weak side linebacker position, where he likely figures in as the starter here. Really talented player, but really limited on experience. So we're going to have to see how he continues to develop his game at the CFL level. And then Adam Auclair, a guy that I was super high on in the 2020 CFL draft, was their first round pick at the end of that first round. A linebacker, DB kind of hybrid guy that is likely going to be a special teams terror as a rookie. Not going to play probably at all at the linebacker position as a rookie, but I just thought I'd throw him in here. And then Dwayne Norman and Shahid Salman, guys that are likely going to figure in as depth pieces, because I think those top 3 starters are pretty well solidified for the Redblacks going into 2021. At defensive back, they're going to rank 5th, and this is a unit that I think played pretty well, all things considered, in 2019, because this was an abysmal team. This 2019 Ottawa Redblacks were a brutal team. Let's put this in perspective, guys. They started 2-0, and then they lost 15 of the last 16 games. It was brutal, and it was mostly the offensive incompetence that really led them to being that. And I think this defensive back unit actually played very well and respectable during the 2019 season. So they do lose Corey Tyndall here, who was a veteran leader for this unit. So they do take a hit in that regard, but I really do still like this unit overall. Randall Evans going to play that corner position. He gets up there. He's physical at the line of scrimmage. You like to see that from a defensive back at the CFL level, especially if you're playing that big physical outside corner position. Sherrod Baltimore, a guy I really liked during the 2019 season, had a great story to get to the CFL, but he is a guy that I think is only going to get better with more playing time at the CFL level. Deshavon Hayes, a guy that had some moments at the CFL level in 2019. Antoine Pruneau has been a perennial kind of all-star caliber safety at the CFL level as also one of their Canadian starters. Very, very interested to see how he comes back from his injury in 2019 with that extra time to heal. Hopefully he's going to be ready to go during this 2021 season. Abdul Kanay, a guy that's been around the CFL for a while, is going to provide a lot of experience at a lot of different defensive back spots. So going to be interesting to see how those top 5 guys play together. And then you got Brandon Dandridge, who ended up starting a couple games. I was not super impressed with Dandridge. He was getting burned left and right when he saw the field in 2019. But he likely figures in as one of these guys that is the next man up in the event of an injury. Justin Howell is a really good backup safety to Pruneau. I think more than capable of being that starter in that instance that Pruneau goes down to injury. And then you got guys like Shamarko Thomas and Tony Anderson and Nate Hamlin. Those guys are mostly going to factor in as depth pieces, I believe. Tony Anderson, a guy that comes through the global draft process. Excited to see how he does coming over from France. And yeah, this defensive back group, I actually really like it, and I've been pretty critical of a lot of defensive back rooms in the CFL over this offseason, and this is not one of them. I really do like the Ottawa Redblacks defensive back room. Now let's look at the best position on this roster, and that's special teams. They're going to rank first in the entire CFL in terms of their special teams. Even though I do prefer when teams have a punter, a kicker, a guy that does both duties, this is the best kicking game in the CFL. Lewis Ward is just such a great pure place kicker. You know, barely ever misses, has good range, you know, does everything you like in that regard. He's also a Canadian. Richie Leone, I believe, is the best punter in the CFL. I think directionally, he does so many things well as a punter in the CFL level. And then Devontae Dedmon, he was quite literally the most dangerous return man in the CFL when he was on the field. He was electric. He had a couple games where he just, was it against the Alouettes, I believe, that he just absolutely lit this team up. He had multiple return touchdowns in a single game. Excited to see his return in this 2021 season. Like I said before, I do think he factors in on the offensive side for this group as well. That is going to be it for the special teams section of this video, and then we're going to go into the projected starters. So let's take a look at this offense, and this was the hardest offense by far, at least so far, to look at and try to project who the starters are on this offense. So we got Rafael Rouge Lopes as the projected outside receiver here in the receiving core. I bolded this position because I could really see a guy coming in, one of these American receivers that we're not too aware of at this point, coming in and, you know, winning these jobs at a training camp. So I could see 3 of these 5 receiving positions really being up for grabs during training camp for this team. But the 2 guys that I for sure see starting in this receiving core are RJ Harris and Anthony Coombs. I really don't see how those guys aren't factoring in day one as starters barring injuries. And then on the offensive line was just a really tricky situation with the retirement of Alex Fontana and Alex Mateus. So I threw Andrew Pickett and Jacob Zott into those starting positions along the interior offensive line. Pickett, again, a former draft pick, gonna try to finally see playing time in the 2021 season. Jacob Zott, a guy that I researched during his time at McMaster, he had some experience playing center, so that might be the position that he gets a chance to crack into the lineup with. And McMillan and Cordy are really going to be the rocks on this offensive line. They're going to really have to depend on those 2 guys. Natai Rogers, I think he's going to start at right tackle, but again, another position I can see some of this competition coming in, someone coming in and stealing it because Rogers is not that established of a CFL player. And then at quarterback, obviously, you got Matt Nichols, and Timothy Flanders is going to be the leader in the clubhouse for the running back position as of right now, but I could easily see a guy like Akeem Hunt or one of these other Americans coming in and scooping up that job. On defense, it's a little more straightforward. So your Canadian starters on defense are Cleon Lang at defensive tackle, going to be one of their standouts. Antoine Pruneau at safety. Again, hopefully he regains that all-star level ability that he had prior to his injury. But then, you know, everybody else is pretty predictable from the American side, other than the corner Brandon Dandridge. I could see Abdul Kanay starting at corner or Brandon Dandridge at that one wide side corner spot, but gotta be interesting to see where they decide to slot in these guys. And don't pay too much attention to where I position these guys, at least in the defensive backs, because teams can switch these around depending on their lineup combinations. So if they're playing halfback, if they're playing corner, some of them get switched around quite often. So it's gonna be interesting to see who starts at that corner position. But other than that, this defense looks pretty set. Now let's get into my team award predictions for this 2021 Ottawa Redblacks season. For most outstanding player, I'm going with linebacker Don Unumba. As I said before, I just think he's going to be a big difference maker for this defense. I think the path towards this team being a very good team this year is through a dominant defense and kind of a ball control kind of offense. And I think Unumba is going to be a big part of it. I think he could have a monster stat line this year. He can have those 5+ sacks or 3+ interceptions, those kind of figures that will garner interest for the most outstanding player award. So I think Unumba is my pick here at the most outstanding player award. For most outstanding defensive player, not much to say here because I'm picking Unumba as well. If you're most outstanding player, you're going to be most outstanding defensive player as well. And then most outstanding Canadian, I think for sure is going to be Cleon Lang, especially with Brad Sinopoli out of the picture. I think Lang is the best Canadian on this roster at this point. For most outstanding offensive lineman, I'm going with Matt Cordy. I think he is bound to take a next step in his development, especially playing that tackle position, which is honestly just so much harder and more challenging for an offensive lineman to play. And I think if he just continues to show a little bit more progress like he was showing at the end of the 2019 season, he's going to be a shoe-in for this offensive lineman award. And then for most outstanding rookie, take a name out of the hat because it's hard to say what rookie is going to make an impact on this team because there's so many at so many different positions that could potentially break into the lineup and make an impact. So I'm going to say Jordan Smallwood, who had some XFL experience in 2020, a guy that has some recent film on him, so he might get to the lineup pretty early, and he also has that college pedigree playing at Oklahoma. So I'm going to go with him, but it really could go so many different ways. I think it's going to be one of those receivers that comes out of nowhere, and we just don't know exactly who that guy is yet. And then finally, I'm going to go into my final thoughts about this Ottawa Redblacks team going into this season. So the key question with this team going into 2021 is, can Ottawa get production out of newcomers at the skill position? I think you're likely going to need these newcomer guys to step up to really raise the ceiling of this team. And it's happened in the CFL before. It can happen, you know, when guys that don't have CFL experience, they can come in and light the league up right away. It's not all that likely, but it can happen. And can Ottawa get something and find a gem out of this group of receivers or running backs that could really raise the potential of this offense? Because with the existing players that have shown play at the CFL level, they just really don't look to have all that high of a ceiling. But here's my general prediction. I do think they're going to miss the playoffs, but I think they are going to be much more competitive than people think. I think that they likely win like 4 or 5 games instead of like the 3. I think Bodog.net has them projected as winning. So I think they're going to be a competitive team. I think Paul LaPolice as a head coach, he's a very smart guy. I think he has some really good schematics, and by the end of the season, he will probably have sorted this thing out, the whole depth chart. But I think with just a month to go before the season, I think this is just too little of a window to really evaluate these guys going into this shortened season, and I think they'll be buried pretty early in the standings. So it's going to be very much an evaluation year for Ottawa, but I am really excited to see how this roster shakes out. And with that said, that is going to be the end of today's video, ladies and gentlemen, and I want to thank everyone for watching. Once again, my name is Jason. If you want to support the channel, the best way to do it is by hitting that like button and subscribing to C's Huddle for more CFL content just like this. I greatly appreciate all the support, guys. And with that said, I'll see you guys next time, and please let me know in the comments section what you think about today's video. Peace.